Scotch. What we have here are different whiskey making regions. So you've got the Lowlands, Highlands, and the Speyside, Island of Islay, and Campbelltown. Campbelltown, have you heard of it? Campbelltown, is this something you've come across? Yeah, a couple of nods, a couple of no's. If you haven't, don't worry, it's a lovely producing Scotch whisky region. It's just a very small one. There's 3 distilleries there, and the whisky they make is fantastic, but because it's so small, we're going to leave it to one side. We're going to spend a little bit longer on the 4 regions on the card I gave you when you walked into the room. I'm sure you all observed they're colour-coded. Did you smell them?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so happy. They are aroma cards, they smell absolutely fantastic. We're going to talk about each one individually. Now this aroma reflects the style of whisky from the area. Please don't treat this too strictly. It's very exaggerated, it's quite generalised. It's meant to be an introduction to the regions. So feel free to tell me what you smell, because I'm not going to show you right away what we think it is. I'd love to hear what you think as well. First region we're going to talk about is the green one, up in the top left-hand side of the card. Welcome to the Lowlands of Scotland. You are currently sat in the Lowlands. Now, the Lowlands is essentially anything between that yellow line, which is called the Highland Divide, it's an imaginary border, and this, the border with England. These red dots are distilleries. I'll be honest with you, this map is a little bit older. A couple more distilleries have opened in the area recently, which is terribly exciting. A lot of investment in Scotch whisky at the moment. What you tend to find in this region is lovely citrusy whisky. It tends to be quite light, very smooth. New whisky drinkers sometimes find these a bit more palatable. They tend to be that easier just to introduce yourself to Scotch. Now, what I'd like to do is give that green section a rub to the top left-hand side of the card. Give it a smell. What do you think? Lemon? You like it? Yeah. I do too. I think it smells of aftershave. Yeah.
Fresh.
Fresh, yes, definitely very fresh. Anything like mint or pine? Citrus? Yes, fantastic. If you've got something like smoke, that's okay. This is an artificial citrus, so that's maybe where you're making that link. I think that's why I get aftershave, because this is, like you mentioned, fresh. It's very clean aroma. I think that's where the mint and the pine come from, because they're very uplifting. Just so you know, the big one is the one in the card. These are flavours you're going to get if you try whiskies more generally from the area. Now your second region, yellow one, up at the top right-hand side of the card, this is the Highlands. Very large area, and you can see there's quite a few distilleries in here. Don't forget the islands off the west coast are included as part of this region as well. Now, because there's so many distilleries and the area is very large, there's a large variety in the type of whiskies being made here. What you tend to find in the mainland, centre of Scotland, much sweeter whiskies. Flavours like vanillas, honeys and caramels. Out to the coast, very, very different. These whiskies can be slightly smoky because some of these distilleries are using peat to dry out the barley. So just bear that in mind if you're looking for a present or a dram. Now, think of that yellow section around. Give it a smell. What do you get?
Vanilla.
Vanilla, yeah. I get custard, creme fraîcheur. Yeah. Anything else? Or we're going with vanilla? Is this our answer as a group? Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because that's what it's supposed to be. I was trying to lead you astray with custard. I'm very sorry, that was terrible of me. People often say honey, white chocolate, caramel, butterscotch. That's fine. These are all very sweet aromas, and vanilla is a very sweet aroma. So if you've got anything along those lines, that's perfect. That's pretty much what we were going for, so good on you. Vanilla tends to come from American oak bourbon casks. So white oak, but also bourbon's a much sweeter drink, so you get these lovely sweet flavours from that. Now, this little region here is your next one. This is Speyside, and it's the blue one. Quite a small area, nearly 60 distilleries up here. Nearly half of all single malt in Scotland is produced in this one area. It's named after the River Spey. That basically goes right the way through the region. This is the fastest flowing river in the UK, and it's hugely popular for salmon fishing. Now, I bet you're debating about what blue one smells of. I'll first explain Speyside creates fruity whisky. We reckon this is because the water is so soft up in these parts. It's very pure water, but fruit seems to be a very common trend among these distilleries. Now that I've told you that, what do you think the blue one smells of? If you get it?
Like banana.
Like banana? That's amazing! If you're getting pear drops, everyone from the UK says pear drops, like without a shadow of a doubt. It's always the same. Like, I don't know what it is. I totally agree with you. It smells like very nice. Bubblegum. Yeah. If you've got bubblegum, pear drops, anything like that, well done, because this is the hardest one to get. You were actually right with banana. Yeah. And I'm really impressed, because no one ever says bananas. They always say bubblegum or pear drops. So if you did get bananas, well done. You're in the minority, but I applaud you. Fresh fruits you're going to get from bourbon casks like apples and pears. This one, dried fruits, raisins, sultanas, sherry casks. European oak, it's a much richer oak, and sherry is a very rich drink, so you get these darker flavours from it. Now, this little red one is your final region. Please be careful. This is the island of Islay. 8. There's going to be 9 distilleries really soon. Again, very exciting. And they produce quite smoky whiskey. Yeah, very powerful, strong aromas. This is because they're using peat to dry out the barley. If you dry out your barley with peat, what happens is the smoke rises and it dries out the barley. Inside of the smoke there are oils called phenols, and they're absorbed into the grain, and that's where your smokiness comes from. A very done thing on Islay, very, very common on Islay. Not exclusive to this region, so just bear in mind there are smoky whiskies elsewhere in Scotland. I don't pause this one. I'm sorry to ruin the game, but I think if we all smell the red one, we'll all be agreed. What do you get? Wood, smoke, charcoal, tobacco. Someone did say once, I'm just going to throw this out there, gasoline.
Yes, no.
Yeah, no. Why not? Yeah, you're like, no. Does not smell of gasoline at all. This gentleman said it, like, I didn't even ask what you smelled. He went, gasoline, that was it, that was the conversation. To be fair, why not gasoline? Taste and smell are a very, very personal thing to you. So that gentleman got gasoline. Someone said coffee once. Why not? I don't know what coffee you're having that smells or tastes like that. But why not coffee? Why not? Don't stress if you got things like, you know, caramel instead of vanilla, fudge instead of vanilla. That's fine. It's the same with whiskey. Smell and taste are going to react very differently, palate to palate. So the whiskey notes might say caramel, you get fudge. That's fine. Don't be disheartened. If you're getting something sweet, you're definitely along the right line. So just keep at it. If you cook, you'll be really quick at identifying flavours. We tend to see a trait among good cooks. I am not a good cook. As you probably notice, I'm really bad at this. But there we go. Those are your 4 regions. We will do a tasting. I promise it's in the pipeline, it's coming. You get to pick your whiskey. So you can use one from one of the regions. You can use a blend, if you so prefer. I do have a whiskey liqueur. And we appreciate not everyone is hugely into drinking Scotch whiskey, and that is completely fine. The whiskey liqueur, perfect again for this time of year, perfect for this weather. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. First, I need to talk to you about blends. Now, please don't underestimate blends, just kind of as an introduction. They're so important, extremely valuable for the Scotch whiskey industry if you treat it as a whole. Blended Scotch accounts for 90% of our exports. Huge amount of Scotch that goes out worldwide is in fact blended. If you break it down into what it actually is, it is single malt Scotch whisky and grain whisky. We blend these 2 different types of whisky together. Grain whisky is made from wheat or maize in this style of production. It's called continuous distillation. Now what this picture doesn't show you is the height of these stills. Maybe 40, maybe 60 feet tall, 2 or 3 stories, they're massive. And they're running continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That means you can make about 10 bottles of grain whisky a second. You can only make about 10 mils of single malt in that same period of time. So if you're making grain whisky, you have a massive advantage. You're also going to find, like, if you go into a bar, just try grain whisky on its own. Beautifully sweet, perfect summer drink. It's very mild, very easy drinking. But it's really rare, actually, to go into bars and find grain whisky bottled as single grain. We usually keep it back for blending. And we use it as a base, we use it as a starting point. Essentially what we do is add the different single malts to the grain whisky. Create a lovely balanced whisky overall. Which is essentially what this gentleman's doing here. Now, this gentleman, he's an example of a master blender or a whisky maker. We have master blenders, men and women. Sorry guys, my 3rd tour of the day, I'm starting to lose my game. Working right the way across Scotland. Male and female. They're usually in charge of a portfolio of whiskies, combination of single malts and blends. What you'll find is that they're trying to make sure your whiskies are consistent. This is a very difficult job. There's a lot of stock control involved, and there's a lot of lab work involved, a lot of science. Some of this work is done by smell. What they're doing is taking lots of different samples from casks, and then they'll pick the casks they want to make the whiskey. If it's a single malt Scotch, all of the casks come from one single distillery. Definition of single malt is single site. If you're making a blend, you can use casks from as many different distilleries as you like, and your grain whiskey as well as your base. And once the whiskies are picked, the casks are selected. The warehouse men go and they collect all the different casks. They'll tip the whiskey into a vat, allow that to mix, before putting it back into an oak cask for about 6 to 18 months. These are usually recycled casks. Generally, they don't carry any flavour. What you're doing is allowing the whiskey to mix before you go on to bottle it. And we call this marrying. This ensures the whiskey is consistent. So once the whiskey is bottled, we're kind of coming into the final stages before you can go out to buy it. Your label will always say Scotch. It will always tell you what type of Scotch it is. This part is optional. If there is an age on the whiskey, this is the youngest whiskey in that bottle, by law. Same for single malts, it's the same for blends as well. So say the bottle does say 12, we'll take this as a nice example. Everything in there will be at least 12. Older whiskies are fine. If they match the colour and the flavour profile of the whiskey, you can use older whiskies, not a problem. You just can't use anything younger. Don't worry too much about age. What you'll find is that different ages give you different whiskies. So young whiskies tend to be more intense in things like sweetness and smokiness. Bless you. They won't spend a very long time inside the cask. Things like spiciness, dried fruits, they can spend a very long time inside the cask. You'll find a very different flavour in older whiskies than you will to young whiskies. Bless you. Everyone doesn't seem very well today. The whiskey's going to help, trust me. Basically, just try bottles that are young, old, try whiskies that have no age on them. Don't be afraid to experiment with it either. Whiskey is a fantastic base for a cocktail. Add water, add ice, just relax. Have fun with it. You're meant to enjoy it. Responsibly. Responsibly. That's everything I wanted to share with you up until this point. Next part of your tour is your tasting. Please have a